Hi, welcome to My Favorite Mistake. I'm your host, Mark Graven. Our guest today is Kendall Berg. She is an internationally published author, TEDx speaker, and career coach dedicated to helping professionals master the career game and accelerate their success. So, after experiencing her own transformation from being stuck at a manager level for over 5 years to then earning 5 promotions in 6 years, Kendall became passionate about empowering others to navigate corporate politics, something I never enjoyed doing, Kendall, and building their leadership presence. So she has a recent book titled Secrets of the Career Game 36 Strategies to Get Ahead in Your Career. And she has a podcast of the same title. So, Kendall, thank you for being here today. How are you?
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really looking forward to our chat.
Yeah, well, I'm excited to hear your story. We'll talk about other ideas and lessons learned from the book, but let's jump right in. From the different aspects, different stages of your career, what would you say is your favorite mistake?
I've talked about this often. A lot of the time, I think when we look back on our lives, we think that mistakes are the setback.
Mhm.
We feel like the mistake is the piece that made us slower to the target that we wanted to be at, or it really, held us back from achieving the things that we wanted. But for me, my mistake was the catalyst that created the entire life that I live now. And
Yeah.
so for me in my career, I was very tactically focused. I think many people are, right? We get really, really good at our niche and our job, and we think really strongly about executing that niche well. And the mistake that I made is I was so technically proficient that I thought I didn't have to be nice.
Oh,
Like the simplest way to put that,
yeah.
not because I didn't like people and not because I didn't get along with people on a personal level, but because I didn't want to waste time. I wanted to be efficient. I
Oh,
wanted to get the work
mhm.
done. And as a result, I got stuck and not only got stuck, but got incredibly frustrated where I was being peeled off of really big projects that I had been leading, where I was not able to step into the type of roles that I knew I was capable of. I was offered a director position at one point, but without the title or the pay. So I was still a
Mhm.
manager, but I took over this director's job and led their whole team for them. And the mistake of not learning people, of not learning corporate politics, of not learning how to build these relationships would have gone completely missed by me forever if I had not had a VP at the time who I thought really highly of, who was a really good guy, really nice, had a lot of respect for him. And he wasn't even my direct leadership, but he
Mhm.
pulled me aside in a performance review into a separate conference room and he sat me down and he goes, Kendall, everybody loves having you on their team. You're so productive. Nobody likes working with you.
My, wow.
And
Yeah.
I was like, this seems a little harsh. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
he wasn't wrong, right?
Yeah.
I look back, delivery could have been a little bit nicer. We could have maybe,
You got your attention.
but it did. It got my attention. And this was somebody
Yeah.
I really respected, who I knew my technical acumen, who I knew valued the work that I did. And yet, even with all this positive that I was delivering, he went, no, like nobody likes to work with you and you're never going to get where you want to go until you fix that. And so for me, that was the big mistake, was investing so heavily in doing my job, right? I hear people all the time, I just kept my head down,
Mhm.
did my job, right? This is really common in military personnel, especially like, oh, I just kept quiet, did my job. But the people who find a lot of success, whether it's corporate, whether it's entrepreneurial, whether it's, building their own thing or working for somebody else, it's people who understand people.
Mhm.
And I just had totally missed them.
So, what was the industry or the type of setting that you were working in at the time?
So I worked in financial services. So I was in banking.
Yeah. Because that, I mean, what you're describing is a common engineer trap. And I say that as an engineer.
Yes.
And as I detoured a little bit in reading your introduction, I mean, early in my career working for large publicly traded corporations, I would bemoan playing politics.
Yep.
And at some point, you have to accept that as a reality.
Well, and I think that all of us play politics in every area of our lives. We just don't like to admit it.
Oh,
The difference is in your personal life, the politics we choose to play most often is we eliminate the pieces we don't like, right? I
mhm.
don't get along with John. I never see John again in my personal life because I don't have to. And so I
Mhm.
don't have to quote unquote play politics as much in that situation. But at work, we don't get to choose the people we interact with. We don't get to pick the workforce, right? It's like school.
Mhm.
I would argue education system has just as many politics, if not more so, than the corporate world.
Sure.
And we all play these politics. We just don't like to call them that.
Mhm.
And there's a couple bad eggs who are very artificial, very inauthentic, very fake. When they play politics, it gives it kind of a bad reputation, right? But if you think of any project you ever led where you had to work with somebody you didn't like, you
Mhm.
probably played politics.
Sure.
Odds are you didn't sit that person down and go, John, you're an idiot. I don't want to
Yeah.
work with you. You didn't do that. You went, oh, thank you so much, Sean, for this. I'll have to go double check it now because I don't know that it's going to be right. Right. We play these politics whether we want to or not. And so, what I often tell people is you have the choice of not learning the game, and that's going to hold you back. That's going to make it harder to get the things you want. It's going to make it harder for you to be successful. Or you learn how the game works, and then you choose how you want to play. There have definitely been times in my career where I could have played politics a different way and it would have been better for me, but it would have gone contrary to my values or my morals, or it would have
Mm.
gone
Right.
contrary to how I like to show up. But that's an intentional choice. Not learning how to do it is ignorance. And to me, I'm like, why would you put yourself in a position where you don't know how to play? We were just talking pickleball before we started recording. Okay. First time you play pickleball, you don't know how to play. And if
Right.
I said, I want you to bet your salary on this game, you're probably going to go, nope, thank you.
Yeah.
I'm going to
Well,
practice a few times. Right. And that's how it really works in the corporate world as well.
there's skills and there's technical proficiency, but there's, you could call it etiquette,
Mhm.
call it social norms. So like I show up and it's what they call open play and you rotate through with different people. And most people introduce themselves and at least say hi. Some people don't. Maybe
Mhm.
they're shy. They're not there to make friends. But then there's the politics of like, I'd rather play with somebody that, is encouraging when you miss a shot or says good job when you do well, as opposed to just not interacting with you. Maybe that
Yeah.
is, I mean, that's like maybe a different example of politics, not to get too sidetracked there.
No, but it's absolutely true, right? And I use dating a lot as an example. Okay. So if you went on a date with somebody and tactically they said all the right things, right? They have the job, they have the house, they have the 2.5 pets, they have, they're well spoken, they, all of these things, but they never make eye contact with you. They never ask you anything about yourself. They don't seem interested in you as a person at all. They're just tactically
Mm.
correct.
Yeah.
You're probably gonna leave that date and be like, "Oh my god, they were so boring, or they didn't seem interested in me at all, or they were self-absorbed," or whatever it is, even though tactically they had the skills to date, socially they didn't. And this is true, the pickleball example, the dating example. It's the same thing everywhere. I think it just gets a bad reputation in corporate because it determines so much of our livelihood. And
Sure.
we say, well, I like Mark. Mark goes to the happy hours. And Mark got promoted. I didn't go to the happy hour and I didn't get promoted. That's not fair,
Yeah.
right? But if Mark spent that happy hour building relationships with the executive team, understanding what's important to them, getting to know them, also talking about his own work, advocating for himself, and then he gets
Mhm.
promoted, people see that as unfair, but that's just how people work.
Yeah.
And so we have to be intentional sometimes with some of these things that we choose to do or choose not to do. You could say, hey, I'm willing to have my career go a little slower so that I don't have to go to that happy hour I don't want to. Totally a choice, but we have to do it on purpose. Otherwise, you just blame everybody around you instead of
Mhm.
making intentional decisions.
Yeah. And the things you're talking about, the social aspects of work could be framed in a negative way.
Mhm.
Somebody might say, oh, so and so, they're schmoozing,
Yep.
they're kissing up, or they're bragging, or it
Mhm.
could be framed in a more positive way of, like you said, building relationships.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with doing that.
Well, and you have an engineering background. I always think this is a helpful reframe. So if you're listening to this and you're like, this is all well and good, but I don't want to do it. Cool.
Mm.
That's fine.
Uh-huh.
Think of the most technically proficient person you ever worked with. They were super, super smart. They got their code done the fastest. They got their work done the fastest. It was always perfect. They probably worked nights and weekends because that's what those people tend to do. They tend to be very high performers, overachievers, right? Think of that person and then imagine You have to work for them.
Uh-huh.
They don't want to teach you how to do it. They just want to do it because they're the smartest in the room and they already know how. So they don't delegate well. They don't understand the mistakes you're making because they wouldn't make them. So they don't give good feedback. They don't give good coaching. They don't know how to train you.
They can't
And
relate.
then, yeah. And then they go into a meeting to present the work that your team did, but presentation is not their skill. Storytelling is not their skill. So they go in and they go, we built A. Well, that doesn't help you get promoted. That doesn't help you become a better employee. That doesn't help you become a manager. And so people think that the social aspect is unfair, but nobody wants to work in a real meritocracy. Because in a real meritocracy where the smartest engineer is managing all the other engineers, does not make that engineer a good boss.
Right.
Doesn't make them a good leader. It doesn't make them a visionary. It doesn't make them a strategist. Doesn't make them a good communicator or a coach or a trainer. It just makes them really good at their job. And so people, I think it's very easy for all of us. And like I said, I say all of this because I was this person.
Uh-huh.
I was like, it should be a meritocracy. Who cares if I was rude in the meeting? I was right. I saved us all time. Let's all move on, right? But nobody wants to work for that person because that person's not a good boss. They don't have the soft skills and the coaching, the trainability that you need to be able to lead others. And so we kind of want it both ways. We think everybody else should have to be nice and a good coach and good at communicating and good at storytelling. But I should be able to be rude and just do my job.
Right.
And we don't always think of it in terms of the ecosystem that is everybody working together. So I
Mhm.
always share that example because when I've asked people, clients of mine that I've worked with before, I'm like, okay, this really technical person who's working for you that you think is great, would you work for them? And they're like, oh, no, absolutely not. They'd be a horrible boss. I'm like, cool, then you can't promote them.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
the same on the opposite side. Maybe they're not as technically proficient, but they're always willing to train their team members. They always give good feedback. They're a great communicator. They advocate for people. You'd rather have that person sitting at the happy hour advocating for you than a boss who's sitting there writing more code who doesn't know how. So
Yeah.
all of this helps us elevate and continue to grow as well as we progress
Uh-huh.
up the ladder in whatever way we do that.
Uh-huh. And when you think of meritocracy, there's different aspects of merit. There's
Mhm.
technical ability, technical proficiency, but these other things matter. And we all know a lot of settings, whether it's, in software development, engineering. I've done a lot of work in healthcare. Sometimes the person who's the best nurse makes a terrible nurse manager for reasons that you've brought up and otherwise. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting when people talk about meritocracy, are they talking about just like raw smarts? Like there's more required even in school. Like even if school was purely a meritocracy, we would take standardized tests and like well, there's no need for grading. We'll just you know
Yeah.
you've got to excel in other elements of school.
Absolutely. And school is incredibly isolating for people who are incredibly book smart but lack street smarts. I have 2 kids, I have 1 of each. I have a book smart genius and I have my street smart daughter. All
Yeah.
right. I can tell you one of them has a much easier time at school
Hmm.
all the time, right? Now they're both great kids, but they have different strengths that play out different ways in these situations. And so, when I talk about my biggest mistake being that I didn't learn politics early on, the way that I define politics is your ability to communicate and build rapport with the people around you, right? You have to build influence. And the problem is that a lot of these soft skills, these playing the game pieces, nobody teaches us how to do them. It's like a monkey see, monkey see, or monkey see, monkey do. You're supposed to see Mark being social and copy it and do it in an authentic way, and it's going to work. But most people can't, right? Because the way one person approaches a situation is different than another. So what I always tell people is if you're listening to this and you're like, okay, this is all well and good, but like then what do I do? Right? How do I start to get better? My first coach ever is the person who's the reason I'm now a coach. She was a VP at the same company where I got that feedback. And that original individual who gave me that feedback, by the way, who said, everybody loves having you on their team. Nobody likes working with you. I said, great. How do I fix that? And he goes, oh, I have no idea. But you're going to go talk to Allison. And Allison had the same reputation and she fixed it.
Ah,
So you're going to go talk to her.
yeah.
Well, this is my first coach, my first mentor. And I remember I sat down with her and I said, listen, I got this feedback. I don't know how to fix it. And she goes, oh, you really don't like small talk, do you? And I was like, no, it's a waste of time. She goes, okay, we're
Right.
going to start there.
Yeah.
She goes, I don't even know you. And you sat down and you went, I got this feedback, help me fix it. No intro, no, here's my background. No, it's great to meet you. Nothing. She's like, you just jumped in. I was like, yeah. She's like, do you do that all the time? I was like, yes. And so small talk is the
Mm,
easiest win. And I'm not saying, hey, how's the weather? I'm saying like take a genuine interest in something that's interesting in somebody else. Right. We talked before we joined. I'm like, oh, where are you? Great. That's similar to where I grew up. Are you familiar with
mhm,
these areas? What'd you do before the call? And it's not just because I want small talk. I genuinely care. Right.
mhm.
I've now referenced that entire conversation over
Yeah.
the course of this podcast.
Yeah.
But you have to be interested. So small talk is an easy win. Second thing is you have to care about other people. And that
Mm,
sounds both obvious and like it should be implied. But especially at work, we get such tunnel vision and we think, I need to deliver A. I have a deadline of B. I have to get XYZ done. And we're so I focused that we lose sight of the person we're asking to do something for us has their own list.
yeah.
They have their own stuff they've got to go do. So if you take a genuine interest in them, hey, I know you're super busy. I hate to come to you with this, but I'm being asked to do this. Do you have something similar you've already built that I can use? Or is there somebody else I could go to ask because I know how much you have on your plate? When you make this small shift of like, okay, what's important to that person? What is that person going through before you go into the conversation? It's going to go so much smoother 100% of the time,
Yeah.
right? This is the how to win friends and influence people, right? Care
That's
about what
the
they,
alternative, right?
yeah,
That
it's
book's probably 100 years old or
it
close to.
doesn't matter, still
Yeah.
works,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And that's the thing that people miss is we don't care enough about others to show care. So small talk, showing genuine interest in other people, and then not being afraid to brag about yourself.
Mhm.
People, myself included, I think the work speaks for itself,
Yeah.
right? And I
We
think
think it should.
we think it should, right? And I think I even give this example in my book. I say, I've never had an Excel spreadsheet walk into my performance review and tell my boss I need to get promoted. Okay. It doesn't speak.
Right.
It does deliver, it has impact. But if you can't articulate, here's why this was important, here's the impact that it added, here's the value that it delivered, here's why I did it. If you can't say these things, the work's not going to do it for you. And so being able to have these conversations in a constructive way that says, hey, I just finished this. It was really important because it's going to help the company do these things. I got to work with these great people. I'd love to present it to the leadership team. What's a great opportunity for me to do that? What's the right place to take that? Starting to think about these types of opportunities as opposed to just, hey, here's that thing you asked for. There's a time and a place for that, right? You have a boss message you a fire drill and they're like, hey, I need this in 20 minutes. You're like, cool. It's in your inbox, right? But there's plenty of times where then maybe we go back to that 2 days later and we say, hey, about that request. Is this something you're going to ask for more often? Should I build it in a repeatable way? Should I be presenting it to the broader group? How can I utilize it? But we don't always do that because we're so focused on delivery. And so those would be the three easiest things you can do. If you're listening to this and you're like, man, I probably need to get a little bit better at playing politics, I would start with those, and that's going to build some momentum.
Yeah. And it's funny though, people and myself included here will cringe a little bit about the phrase playing politics. I think it's very similar to where people might say, like, I don't want to be salesy.
Yeah.
Like it's all in how you frame it.
Yeah.
Right? Or authors who say, like, I don't want to be self-promotional. Like, promote your book. Like, you can brag about yourself. You got to talk about, you think your book is worth reading, right? Like,
Mhm.
you have to. And if you want to frame that as helping others because you wrote a book, 36 strategies to help
Mhm.
others, like that, I think you just have to reframe politics, reframe promotion or
Yeah.
things and think it like who doesn't want to say, who doesn't want to communicate better and build rapport with people? I mean, and like you said, some people might say, that's not me. Okay. You're going to stay in technical roles. And that's okay.
Yeah, and that's the big piece is that self-awareness, that last little nugget that you said, Mark, of you can say, "Hey, I don't wanna build rapport with other people. I just wanna sit at my desk, write my code, go home at the end of the day." That's great. You will be capped.
Yeah.
And if you're comfortable with where that cap is, then that's a choice you make, right? I have clients all the time come to me and they're like, "I don't want to be a boss." I'm like, "Great. Let's find out how we make you the most money without making you ever in charge of other people, because that's not gonna work."
Yeah.
But I do think that we have to have that self-awareness. Most people just think, I want to be let's use CEO as an example, right? I've shared this before. So the first interview I had after college, so I did my last 2 years of high school, my first 2 years of college at the same time. So when I
Oh,
graduated college, I was very young.
mhm.
And I went into this interview. I met somebody at a job fair. They were hiring for a job I was not qualified for. And I begged them. I was like, just interview me. Like, I'm telling you, I would be so great at this. I know I don't have like the checklist that you're looking for, but I can do it. And he put me in a room with the CFO. Horrible mistakes were made by everybody involved in this. Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm in the room with just the CFO. And I remember his like second question in the interview was, what do you want to do when you grow up? And I said, I want to be in your office in 6 years. And he was like, ballsy, right?
Yeah.
Like, what a coming out of the gate swinging, right? But in that same interview, he asked me and 3 other candidates what we thought of this, marketing strategy that they had. Basically, they were changing their core customer, what we thought of it. And the 2 other people said, "Oh, it's great. I'm so excited to be a part of it. This is gonna be awesome." And I went, "I don't think you understand your core customer at all. And I think if you did, you'd never try to make this change because you're gonna have a really rocky road trying to get where you're trying to go."
Were you being rude but right?
I was rude but right,
Yeah.
and he hired me. Now, then, very short fast forward to, yeah, nobody likes working with you, you gotta fix that, right? So we had a flip, but it was one of those moments in my career where I knew that I didn't wanna be the person who placated everybody, like, that was part of my self-identity, I had that self-awareness, but I also knew it was gonna limit me. Like, I walked out of that interview and I was like, "Oh, he's not gonna hire me now." Like, I knew as soon as those words were out of my mouth, I was like, It's not gonna be it's
Yeah.
not gonna go the way I wanted it to, but that's okay." And the fact that he did was great, but it was not because I was so contrary in the interview, right? He
Right.
needed that opinion. He agreed with my opinion, which is the only reason that it ended up being palatable to him. But he needed the other skills that we had talked about. So this self-awareness thing becomes really important where if you walk out of every situation thinking you're always in the right, you never grow. And if
Mhm.
you think you can do every job, you'll never get promoted because you can't do every job. You have to be specific with your skills and how you develop. So I think self-awareness is really key when you're growing, right? When I got that feedback from a VP, I could have been defensive. Inside, I felt defensive, right? I felt like, I don't but I do so much. Like,
Right.
isn't that worth more?
Yeah.
But you have a choice in that moment. In that moment, I went, there's some amount of truth here, or he would have never said this to me. And I need to figure out what the some amount of truth is.
Right. Right.
So you got to be self aware. And I love your idea of reframe. Stop thinking of it politics and start thinking of it of like genuinely being interested in other people, building connection, caring about what they have going on. Because when you think of it that way, it seems a lot less icky to the person who doesn't want to play
Right.
politics.
And, you talk about caring about other people. The VP who gave you that advice clearly cared and
Mhm.
wanted better for you,
Yeah.
and they were willing to take action,
Yep.
right? So it's one thing to care and sort of sit and think like, "Oh, poor, Kendall, so much potential, but she's not," or to complain about it to somebody
Mhm.
else, to step up and, there was positional authority there, but it's still a bit of a risk
Yeah.
to
Well,
give pointed feedback like that.
and he was not my boss or my
Mhm.
boss's boss. He was not in my vertical chain of command at all. He sat in a totally different division. He didn't owe me anything. He wasn't responsible for giving me
Mhm.
feedback. And he could have foregone that and said, well, she's not in my org anyways. Hopefully her boss gives her this feedback, right? He could have left it to somebody else and he didn't. And, it's been almost 12 years ago now that this conversation took place. And I like still keep in touch with him. He's mentioned in the first page of my book. He is the like, thank you so much for giving me the feedback that I didn't know I needed, right? Like he changed the trajectory of my career with taking action because he cared.
Mhm.
Um, and I think a lot of the time we don't do that, right? And I gave a TED talk recently talking about how different generations do not communicate super well. And a lot of it comes down to the fact that we're afraid to overstep. But then if we do overstep, we do it in a really bad way, right? We come out guns blazing. We're like, Mark, I don't like you. And you're like, okay, well, that could have been better, right? Let's phrase it better. But instead, we don't say anything most of the time. Most people avoid, right? It's uncomfortable. We don't want to talk about it. We do this to our own employees. I have in my professional career taken over so many teams, I can't count, where the manager who I'm replacing went, "Oh, also don't give any work to so and so. They're really terrible." So many times I've taken over teams where they're like, "Yeah, we know this person's awful. It was a lot of effort to try to manage them or give them feedback. So we just left them there." I'm like, that's horrible for that employee and for you,
Mhm.
right? But we don't give feedback. We don't give feedback as managers. We don't give feedback as employees. Now, again, going back to the like, I was rude but right. We don't want to do it that way. That was an example of what not to do, right? We want to come at it from the perspective of the other person. Like, hey, I know, I always say, I love to know something about the other person's goals before I give feedback, right? So, Mark, you want to get promoted, but you need to work on your executive presence, right? You don't seem very confident. You don't speak off often in executive meetings, whatever it is. And so I say, well, hey, Mark, I know you want to get promoted. I want to help you get there. What I've noticed is we need to grow this executive presence skill for you to be able to get to the place that you want to go. That's a much more palatable way for Mark to receive the feedback. It's
Mhm.
much easier for me to give it. It's much more likely that both of us take action as opposed to me going, Mark, you don't seem very confident. Mark's going to be like,
Yeah.
cool, you seem really rude. So, like, just stating the obvious here.
Right.
So, putting things in terms of the goals of what other people have is also really important, I find.
Yeah. And it sounds like that VP gave you either unprompted or you asked for more specific things than people don't like working for you. Like, and tell us, maybe before we talk about the book and broader lessons, tell us the rest of that kind of redemption arc story where that feedback was a catalyst for you and getting promoted so many times so quickly.
Yeah, so I asked for specifics. This is something I think most people don't do. We either get defensive or to get out of an uncomfortable conversation, we just go, okay, and then we go back to work and nothing changes. So I went, hey, what can I do about this? Right. And he said, well, I don't know, but you're gonna go talk to Allison. She knows, right? And I said, can you give me some examples? And he did. He said, hey, in this meeting, you didn't seem like you wanted our feedback. And I'm like, but I did. And he's like, but it doesn't seem like it.
Right.
Doesn't matter if you do. It doesn't
Right.
seem like it because when we offer feedback, you get defensive. And I was like, oh, I definitely do that. That's good to know. Right.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. That's one I can work on. And he said, and you don't, you get along with everybody. You're at every happy hour. Everybody likes you. But then you get into a work situation, you don't talk to anybody. You don't make small talk. You don't ask everybody how their day's going. You just go straight to the work. And like, we need more of that. Right. So he gave me some of these examples. I went and sat with Allison and she was really great. We ended up being friends for a very long time. She's really helpful. And she's like, hey, I need small talk. The feedback about not wanting feedback in meetings taught me something that I mentioned in the book called acknowledge and respond. Most people, when we get asked something, we get pushback, we get feedback, we tend to go straight into our response. But what most people want is an acknowledgement first, like, hey, that's really fair what you're saying, or oh, that's a great question, or I'm glad you brought that up because I was thinking about this and it's
Mm.
exactly where my head went. I'm glad we're on the same page. They want some type of acknowledgement before you agree or disagree. They want to know that you heard them. And most people don't do that naturally.
Uh-huh.
And so that was one that I learned. I learned to make small talk. I learned to build more relationships. I learned to advocate for myself in the right situations, right? Not a meeting where I'm telling everybody that I'm right, but in one on ones with my boss and in performance review calibrations and these things. I spent basically a year creating. I'm a tactical person. I started as a data scientist, so not an engineer, but very similar. I like things in order,
Yeah.
and I made templates for everything.
Yeah.
What do you say when somebody brings up something that's contrary to what you think? How do you disagree effectively? How do you write an email? How do you respond in a meeting? How do you structure a meeting? Like I wrote all these templates out and I started implementing them over the course of about a year. And at the end of the year, my actual VP in my reporting chain pulled me into his office and was like, I've never had somebody get so much better so quickly. And so they offered me a promotion, which I took. And then very shortly thereafter, I was recruited to another company. That company offered me basically 2 levels higher. So I took that role. I was there about 6 months, got promoted again. Then I was recruited by an executive recruiter who offered me a CFO role. So I had gone from like a manager who couldn't manage people, couldn't carry a conversation, didn't know how to communicate,
Mm.
to presenting a pitch for what I thought the financial situation of this company should be to their board,
Mhm.
being like, this is how I would run the company as the CFO. And I was offered that job. I ultimately turned it down, which we could do a whole nother episode about.
You thinking that was a mistake, or you're not sure?
No, no, it was definitely the
Mm,
right move. It was not the right culture fit for me. And I
mm,
had just had my first kid. And I remember in the interview, the CEO made a side comment about how I was young. And when I received my written offer, the recruiter said, I know this is below what we had talked about, but you are really young. And
yeah, you wanna hear that.
I was like, listen, if you think I'm capable of doing this job, then my age doesn't matter.
Yeah.
You either think I can do the job and do it well, or you don't.
You can frame that as a positive, as like, she's got so much runway in her career.
Exactly.
And when
I would
someone yeah, right.
so loyal. I would have been all about the company, would have been my whole life, right? That's the stage of my career that I was at. But they made those two couple of comments. And I remember the board called me at 11 at night on a Thursday during the interview
Mhm.
process and asked me to come into the office. And I was like, I don't think this is going to be
Yeah.
the right place for me. I had my daughter would have been 5 months old. So like a baby. And I was like,
Yeah.
I don't think this is gonna be right. So I turned that role down. I was offered a VP role at a different financial services company, which I took, and then later executive directorship. So it ended up being the right move in my career. But I went from really feeling frustrated, unclear what I needed to do, feeling like I was delivering all this work, but it didn't matter, to then everybody seemed to be like, well, no, you want to be a CFO, you want to be a VP, you want to be a managing director, you want to head this division, you want to take over this. And I was like, it was wild how my technical skills didn't improve very much during that 6 years. But because my soft skills had,
Mhm. Mm.
it became very recruitable. So I always tell people then I kind of became the dumping ground for poor performers. Everywhere I worked would go, oh, well, you have all these templates for doing things. You have all these structures for doing things. We'll give you all the people who don't know how to communicate. We'll give you all the people who don't know how to do their work well, who don't know how to talk to executives, and you'll fix them. So at one company, I had 17 people moved into my area who had all gotten essentially ones on their former performance review. So they were rated as not meeting performance. 17 of them got moved into my team and they were like, fix them. Oh, great.
But what you're saying is something really important to me, the idea of giving letting people work in a system in which they can be successful
Yes.
is such a powerful thing when companies do that. And that doesn't just benefit the quote unquote poor performers, that benefits everybody. And it doesn't mean turning people into robots, but
Yeah.
structure.
Yeah.
You know?
And there's very little structure for soft skills.
Yeah.
That's where I think people struggle is they go, what? So I just have to be nicer? I just have to talk more,
Smile more.
smile more? That's my least favorite is when a boss
Yeah.
is like, you need to smile more. I'm like, no, that's
Oh,
horrible advice.
yeah.
But of those 17 people, I did fire 4. 4
Mhm.
just did not get where they needed to go. 5 of them got promoted within a year. So we went from was about to
Wow.
get fired to got promoted in 12 months. And the remainder all moved into upper high performers. Like none of them had any issues. And that was kind of the turning point where I read this book called Every Good Endeavor by Timothy Keller. And it's basically about finding your purpose in life. And I was talking about it with my husband. And I was like, is my purpose making slides for old bankers? Like, I was created to make PowerPoint presentations. Like, this is my skill. And he said, well, you coach all these people to get better at their careers. Why don't you do
Mhm.
that for a living? You should just do that. And I was like, that's not a job. That's like it's like a good boss. That's not a job. It's not a thing. And he kept encouraging me. And in 2020, he's like, I think you should just start posting on the internet. He's like, post some advice. Maybe nobody likes it and I'm wrong, but maybe it's great and we'll see. And my third video got 4 million views.
Wow.
And I went from no business, s- still working my corporate job. I still work my corporate job today, right? I still work
Mhm.
as a director. I oversee a division. And this video blew up and I had 1,000 people on a wait list, like, "How
No.
do I work with you?" And I was like, "I don't know. I've never thought through this before."
Yeah.
So my whole business was born out of this immense need that I
Mhm.
see, which is there are so many people just like me who are good at their jobs, but nobody's teaching them the systems you talked about, Mark. Nobody's teaching
Mhm.
them the structure. Nobody's teaching them how to do it. And so they just keep working hard, and a lot of bosses don't know how to give that feedback, so they go, "You're doing great.
Mhm.
Keep it up." eventually you'll get promoted. And then they never do and they get frustrated. So it was just this huge arc from feeling in my lowest. I left that day early. I remember I went to the mall and I ate in the food court and I called my husband and I was like, I think I'm gonna get fired. Like, you just feel so down
Right,
from
right.
that to then building my business, writing my book, starting my podcast, doing all these things where I genuinely, I get letters every day of, "Oh, this video really helped me," or I, just had a great conversation with my boss for the first time in 3 years, and I love that because we think we can't be taught these things, but you can,
Yeah,
but it requires structure. Most people need structure to be successful.
yeah. So our guest today, again, Kendall Berg. The book is Secrets of the Career Game, 36 Strategies to Get Ahead in Your Career. Podcast, Secrets of the Career Game. Is there another book in you about helping leaders? Like you and I might not agree on the framing, but of like, how to fix your terrible employees. Like people need help with that.
Yeah, I've talked a lot about, especially with the younger generations have a very different way of working. They take feedback very differently. They provide work very differently. I've talked about doing like managing up from the bottom, right? How do you take these people who are really struggling and make them high performers? I've also kicked around the idea with my publisher of writing a book about how to take action because I think so often what holds us back in our careers and our businesses is we want everything to be so perfect that we don't do it ever
Mhm.
instead of just doing it and then finding out how we perfect it. So maybe more to come. Maybe more to come on those two
Yeah.
fronts for sure.
Yeah. And I'll put a link in the show notes, the TEDx talk, the the clash of the generations, not the class, the clash of the generations. Maybe one question for you about that, Kendall. How much do you think, or to what extent is generational conflict in styles or what we label or generalize about different generations? How much is that a cover story for people just not being good communicators across any audience or any generation?
Yeah. So I think a ton of it comes down to communication, right? I think the reason that Gen Z gets such a bad rep right now is they're the truly digital gen,
Mhm.
right? They grew up on Zoom calls, they took school virtually, they had much less people to people interaction, right? And I'm sure many people went to public school, they had extracurriculars. I'm not saying that, but the type of communication that they're used to is much more fluid. It's much more fast paced and it lacks emotional connection generally. And so what happens is when you put that environment in a workplace that is historically built, to use Gen Z terms, on vibes,
Mhm.
right? Like I like working with John, he's easy to chat with, or I like working with Mark, he's really nice. When you go into an environment where it is a lot of that, do I feel connected to you? And you put in a digital generation that's less emotional and more like, hey, I just want to do my job, get my paycheck, go home, let me know. I think you get a lot more friction. Now, the same was said when millennials joined the workforce. Like, oh, millennials are lazy. They don't want to work. They don't want to be here. And you had some kind of rise to the top and go, no, I really do. And then you had some that were like, yeah, I really don't. I'm going to be cool at like the lower levels forever. And that's fine. And that happens every generation,
So,
right?
yeah.
Your high performers kind of rise to the top. Your medium performers kind of find a place where they're comfortable and they stagnate. But I do think to your point, so much of what's happening generationally right now is lack of communication, right? We have older generations who don't know how or don't want to communicate in a digital way. You have a digital generation that doesn't want to connect and do happy hours and hang out. They just want to like send you the file and never hear from you again. So that's definitely where we start to find that friction. And then at some point, that's gonna have to come to a head, and we're gonna have
Mhm.
massive retirements coming. You're gonna have a
Yeah.
new managerial workforce. There's gonna be a lot of shifts that take place in the next 10 years, but that's a lot of it is communication.
Yeah. I mean, I'm squarely in the middle of the Gen X
Mhm.
years. And I mean, the whole slacker thing. Oh, Gen X, they don't care. They're slackers. And, like, okay, I don't like that generalization. But, the one other thing that sort of strikes me is like whatever the youngest generation in the workforce is, you hear all these things about like, they want meaning in their jobs. And I'm like, well, is that because of the generation or is that just young people come in idealistic into the
Mhm.
workforce,
Yeah.
perhaps? And those of us who are now generation or two above that, maybe you forget. It's not so much that you're different, but maybe you forget what it's like to be younger and maybe more idealistic.
I tell people all the time, the worst managers are the ones who forgot how they got there
Yeah.
because the intern knows nothing, but they're not supposed to.
Yeah.
Their job is not to know everything. Their job is to learn from you. And so we have this situation where we had interns on my team this summer, and one of my managers was like, "It takes so much time to explain like what seems like really simple concepts." I'm like, "Yeah, but they know nothing. They're like a child. They have never worked in a corporate office. They've never worked in a situation where they had meetings. They've never had to present to a leader. Like all of this is brand new." And you forget. And it makes you harder on them. It makes you more judgmental and, it makes it more challenging. It's true of me as well. Like I've had younger employees where I'm like, I feel like I shouldn't have to tell you to check people's calendars before you book a meeting. Seems like you should know that. But we do that. We check calendars and then we book a meeting when everybody's free. And that's how calendars work. But it's definitely a thing. And I think that also, I think Gen Z gets a bad reputation because they're coming in a difficult position where costs are really high.
Hmm.
And so even Gen X, when we entered the workforce, even millennials, when they came in, things were more affordable, not cheap, but they were more affordable. And so at least we were working and getting things for that work.
Hmm.
And I feel like a lot of Gen Zs are really discouraged because they're like, even if I work really hard and I get promoted to a manager, I still can't afford a house. Or even if I work really hard and I deliver this huge project, I'm gonna get a 2% raise at the end of the year, and that doesn't even beat inflation, right? So I do understand some of their perspective of like, what's the point in climbing the ladder and getting better if I'm not gonna see any reward on the
Sure.
backside? But again, I think all of this is gonna normalize over time, right? Gen X millennials will become executive leadership. You'll have Gen Zs move into middle management. Suddenly they'll be talking about Gen Alphas and they'll be like, these Gen Alphas don't know anything. They don't communicate. They don't know how to schedule a meeting. They don't know how to do anything. They're lazy. They don't want to work. They just want purpose, right? We'll have this whole cycle repeat,
Sure. Yeah.
but in the moment it becomes really stressful. Now I have two Gen Zs who work for me. And all the time I have one executive, he's a hoot, and he goes, "They're like the exception. They work so hard." And I'm like, "No, they're not an exception. They're just good dudes with a good boss who cares about them. And my employee who manages them really wants them to be successful." Like that's what's happening. It's not a generational thing. It's just an environmental thing. It's a systems thing. And so I do think, like I said, I think it'll normalize over time, but it's definitely, I mean, I hear it all the time. I don't want to hire Gen Z employees. They're lazy. They don't show up. They don't work hard. They,
Yeah.
just do their job and go home. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, you do kind of pay them to do their job and go home though. So got to find a balance somewhere. But I do think it's going to be interesting how this kicks up because Gen Alphas are going to swing one way or the other. So
Let's influence them. Let's coach them and lead
yeah,
them, and let's show them. Let's help them. I was about to say maximize what they want to do. They might not even want to maximize. Let's help them be successful.
yeah,
Let's tap in to their talents and drive and learn from each other.
absolutely. Yeah. We're headed in the right direction. We've got good dialogue happening, right? We've got HR introducing new policies that favor what Gen Z cares about. You've got more dialogue happening from upper leadership. We're starting to have flatter organizations where the CEO sits a little closer to the intern, which allows for more two-way communication, right? There's some good shifts happening, but like with anything, headlines are catchy. Headlines
Yeah.
are
Yeah.
so and so is lazy. So and so doesn't want to work. So and so is a bad communicator. Somebody who doesn't play politics, right? Those are the catchy things that get us interested and get us talking about them. But in reality, I think the biggest game switch we're going to have is AI more so than Gen Z. And so I think we'll find where all of this kind of coalesces in the next few years for sure.
Yeah. Well, Kendall, thank you so much for sharing your story and that whole arc of being in the position to receive the feedback, even if it stung a little at the time, making the best of that and using those lessons to help others. I think that's really inspiring. So again, Kendall Berg, her website is thatcareercoach.net. The book and the podcast are Secrets of the Career Game. And the TEDx talk is out there. It's on YouTube. It's on, I'm sure, the TEDx website as well. The clash of the generations. So much for people to check up and follow up on. Thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, thanks, Mark, for having me. I loved our chat. We'll definitely have to chat again soon.
Take care.